everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. In our last video, we determined that, unfortunately, our 58 Meteor here is pooched. There's nothing left of it underneath. I'll put a link in the description box below to the previous video, or if I can do it, I'll put a link to it up in the corner here. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not exactly a master of this stuff. Let's get to work. So first thing I did while I was away was I made up a set of 4 crappy old wheels and tires that this thing can roll around on. Out of the 4 on it, 2 sort of held air and 2 kept constantly going flat. So I think I've got that sorted out. They're not the best tires in the world. They're like pretty sketchy at best, but they're tires, they're on wheels, they're holding air. Now, what we want to do is, first thing first, we're going to start at the back. What I'm going to do while it's up on the stands, I'm going to get the rear end swapped out because I want that 9-inch out of this car, but I want the car to still be a roller, right? So we're going to do that. And while it's up in the air, I'm going to unhook everything underneath so we can pull the motor and trans out of it. So we'll get the shift linkage, the tranny mount, the 2 motor mounts, the exhaust. There's not really a lot underneath on these old cars, right? We'll get the cooling system drained, stuff like that. And then we can get the engine out and tranny and split them and see if we can figure out what we've got. So in the meantime, here's the rear end we're going to put in it. It's one of those old Dodge rear ends with the tapered hubs that, well, are quite frankly a pain in the neck, right? You can't give these things away. Nobody wants them. So I measured here the spring purchase, and it actually is, I don't know if it's exact, but it's very close to the same spring centers as this Ford car. The rear end itself is a titch wider, but I think we should be okay there. So this is pretty much a bolt-in. At least that's what it says here. So what we're going to do, first things first, I have to get this thing to turn because the brakes on it are stuck and we need it to turn. Otherwise, the whole point of it being a roller is kind of lost, isn't it? So we're going to go and do some beating and banging. These here, you can see that the drums are riveted to the hubs. I might be able to take those rivets off and just knock the drum off. So here we go. After considerable beating and banging, we've got the brake stripped off of this thing so we can stick it in the car and should be good to go. Now what we got to do is, right now the axle stands are under the axle. So what I got to do is I got to jack it back up and see if there's somewhere, maybe just in front of the back wheels here, where the frame is still kind of okay enough that I could put the stands under there, because we need this. We need the springs to kind of droop down so we've got enough room to work and get the rear end out of here. All we can do is try. Well, I found a good solid place on the frame in front of the axle. And that's good because that kind of takes a little bit of the stress off the bottom of the firewall area there. It kind of hangs the weight back the other way. So the door might open again. Now we're going to go ahead, before I do anything, first steps, I got to get the drive shaft out, and we'll get a drain bucket under the back of the transmission, because I don't know if it's full of fluid, full of water, full of dirt, anything. We'll find out when we get the drive shaft out, and then we'll just start at it. We got the easiest thing, I'll just cut the parking brake cables with the zip wheel, and we'll undo the shocks. They don't look like they've been in there for too long, so they should hopefully come out easily. And I'm not expecting too much grief getting this thing out of here. The U-bolts don't even look too bad. And anyway, I've got a lot of good used U-bolts that even if I had to cut these, we're not in a problem there. All right, the shocks are free. We got the cables cut. The drive shaft is out. All that's left now is to get the big air gun and start working on these U-bolts and see what happens. Oh, the nuts came off the U-bolts like butter, like nothing, like they were put on yesterday. Unbelievable. Yeah, I'm telling you, this was a clean car, man. Well, before it got parked in the grass. Oh well, nothing I can do about that, is there? So, what we got to do now is I'm going to let stuff cool off a little bit. Then we'll get the spring plates out and the shocks will come down and everything. And we could see about getting this rear end out of here. And incidentally, it's Halloween today. It's October 31st. And it's a Halloween-y kind of night. It's overcast and windy, but at least it's warm. It's mild out, so the kids should have a good night tonight. Yeah, they're talking about a little bit of rain, but we'll keep our fingers crossed that it stays away. And the way this wind is blowing, there won't be too many leaves left in the trees come tomorrow morning. There we go. She's out. Now we just got to jiggle our new one in and get it bolted down. And we can at least have wheels on the back again. Yeah, it's not too scabbed up. I mean, it's old, it's pitted. I mean, it's from 1958, right? But, you know, it's not horrible. I've seen them a lot worse come out of cars not nearly as old as this one. The spring perches on this little Dodge rear end were actually a little closer together than the Ford perches, but that's okay. We just got a ratchet strap and kind of pulled the springs together a little bit. We'll get the shock plates on and blast the nuts up on both sides before we let that ratchet strap go, and it'll all be good. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Well, we got our U-bolts all tightened up, so let's release this ratchet strap and see what happens. There we go. And it looks like we got lots of room for the wheels too, so we're in good shape here. Thing goes in there like it grew there. Well, I pulled the drive shaft out and oil came out of it. What we're going to do now is I'm going to grab the Sawzall. Both front pipes of the exhaust are junk. They're full of holes, so we'll saw them here in front of the mufflers and drop the mufflers in the little tail spouts or dump pipes, whatever you want to call them off. And then we'll see if we can get the head pipes unbolted from the engine. We got to get, I wonder what they've done with the transmission mount here. Got some kind of little extension on it. So we'll just undo those two nuts there, and that'll be the transmission mount free. Undo the speedo cable. There's not really too much involved in pulling the engines out of these old cars, eh? There's the exhaust out of the way. Pretty tiny little mufflers for a big block. Maybe 2 1/8 pipe. It's not quite 2 1/4. Oh, that's how they did it back in the old days. Everybody didn't do 3-inch like they do now. Well, here we go, starting underneath. I got the transmission draining now. The fluid doesn't look too bad. There didn't seem to be any water in it, so that's something. I'm not too sure what we're going to get out of the engine, though. That might be a little ugly. So in the end, when the pan finally did come like right the rest of the way down, there was a little bit of water in it, but not much. It relatively stayed, you know, kind of down here in the pan. The filter's a little bit rusty, but the actual, like the aluminum parts of the transmission and that are all fine. They show no evidence of being in water. So that's good. Hopefully we've got a good core C6 here. What I'll do now, next up, I'm going to pull the inspection cover off and see if we can get a couple of these converter bolts out, or even one of them. The converter, the transmission is going to have to come off the engine and leave the converter behind because the engine's seized, right? But we'll deal with that once it's out. So sad, this guy here, one of our roller wheels, just refused to cooperate. It wouldn't stay inflated for more than a day. So, well, we were out yesterday, and driving home, I found this little front-wheel drive one in the ditch. It was the wrong bolt pattern, but hey, we've got an electric drill. Now it's the right bolt pattern. Lucky for us, when it stopped, the drain plug for the torque converter was at the bottom. A lot of these old cars had drain plugs in the torque converter, so we've got that draining now. While that's draining, I was able to pull the front exhaust pipes down, well, what's left of them, and get the bolts out of the motor mounts. You've seen they've done some monkey business here. They've moved the transmission mount back to fit this big C6 in here, because the little MX transmission that would have been in here originally, the pan was ended about there. It was just a tiny square, and the tranny mount was probably, this cross member was probably 3 inches forward. So because the frame widens as it goes back, you can see they've put all these packers in here to make up the distance. But you know what? It worked. They got a transmission mount, right? But anyway, that's undone. Now I got to get the speedometer cable here and the shift linkage there. And then that should be it for the transmission stuff. Maybe I might take the cooler lines off too while I'm under here if they'll budge. Well, Halloween is past, but we're going to see if we can see some scary stuff come out of this engine. Already, I've got the drain plug cracked, and what we see coming out of there is water, not oil. So, is it the water pan, or is it an oil pan? I don't know. We're going to find out. It's got some kind of a strange-looking plug in there, too. Oh, heavens, look at that. I better go grab another bucket. Oh, here comes the oil. Look at that. There is oil in it. Okay, I think our one bucket will be enough. Oh, there's worms, oil worms coming out of it. Okay. We'll just let that drain for a while while we kind of clean up under here a little bit. I'll be back when it's done. Alrighty, we're all done underneath. The last thing I did was get the engine mounts undone, so this thing is ready to lift out. What I'm going to do now to make it easier to lift out, we're going to pull the whole front clip off this car. It's, you know, these Fords, the hood opens backwards, so the hood at least has to come off. And it seems to me that this has all been apart and just loosely put back together. So we should be able to pull it all off, lickety-split, and that'll just make it so much easier to get the power plant out. So I'm going to go do that now. When I come back, the whole front clip will be off this car. Well, that's a lot better. Now we can easily pluck this engine out of here. These FE engines are big, man. Considering it started its life as a 332 cubic inch engine, the size of it is just, it's pretty big. And they're heavy too. But anyway, we can go ahead now. I've got just a couple of things left up top here to unhook. There's a choke cable, throttle linkage, and maybe a couple of wires. And then we can put a chain on it and get it out. Look at this. Like, how long does it have to sit for that stuff like that to happen? That's the spring out of the rad hose, I think. All right, here we go. Jack her up, Deb. Let's see what happens. It should come off the mounts, but sometimes these mounts, they get like stuck on there good, you know? So we'll jack her up and see what happens. Slowly, slowly going up. Okay, hang on. Hold her there. Okay, there's that one busted free. See if we can get the other one. There's like a stiffening plate on the back side on the studs, so once we get these kind of There's one stiffening plate down. And here's the other one. Okay, take her up, Deb. Okay, hang on. Go sideways a bit here. Gotta get the one mount out of the frame like that. Now we'll see about getting the other mount out of the holes in the frame. Okay, take her up. Okay, hang on. There we go. Okay, so we can pull it back a bit. All right. Yeah, now let's make sure we don't wreck anything, the tranny dipstick, because it doesn't seem to be bolted to the transmission. Let me make sure there's not a bunch of transmission oil pouring out of it. Shouldn't be because we drained it, but transmissions have mysterious ways of making a mess, especially if I'm involved. Okay, so here she is out. This thing here, the cable bracket holder and the little rooster comb for the spring is definitely indicative of a late 60s car. I'm looking for a tag on this transmission, but I don't see one anywhere. Oh well, that might remain a mystery. Sometimes you can pull them apart and find numbers on valve body parts and stuff and kind of date them that way. But that's not what we're worried about right now. Right now, what we got to do is get the front sheet metal back on this car so it's like back in one piece and it's a car again. Okay, there she is all back together. I pushed it outside. I got a big mess in there I got to clean up. It is a sinister looking car, man. Wow. I just imagine that 390 humming in there and a trunk full of moonshine jugs. Hey? So let's figure out what this thing is. First thing that I got to do is get the transmission off of it. That's easy enough. The converter is going to stay behind because I can't rotate the engine to get the other two converter to flex plate nuts off. Hopefully I can reach in there with a wrench and grab them. They'll be here and here. I got two off from underneath, but these two are still there. So we'll pull the transmission off. Hopefully it won't make too much of a mess because we'll be leaving the converter behind. Well, we got that off. We can tell by looking inside there, it's a fairly fresh transmission. Unbelievable. Not the first time I've come across that. And we can see there's the one converter nut and the other one's there. So we should be able to get those off. I'm going to have a go at it anyway, and I'll be back in a sec. So we got this off of here, and you can see it's actually pretty clean in there. Well, we're finding good stuff already. We got here an old Made in USA distributor cap with brass contacts. We've got a blue streak rotor, a decent looking set of points in there. So hey, we're doing all right. And look at this, an original yellow top Ford coil. Hope it works. Oh man, I mean, when it looks like this inside, is it any surprise that the distributor doesn't want to come out? And this is the good side. Look at this. Oh brother. So I guess now I'm going to try and get the rockers off because the push rods go through the intake manifold. So we got to get them out before we can pull the intake off. Look at that. We've got 4 push rods that are actually stuck, fused into the rockers with rust. Wow. I'm going to grab my little shop vac now and clean up as much of this crap as I can. Okay, let's see if we can get this intake popped up. Yeah, see the damn distributor, it goes through the intake and it's pushed into the block. So the distributor isn't going to come out with the intake. We got to get the distributor out. And if I got to break it, I got to break it. We'll try maybe a little bit of heat on it, eh? I'll be back. The distributor is completely fused in the engine block. I did end up breaking it, so it's broken. What are you going to do? And I still can't get the intake off. That's all right. I'll get in there with a Sawzall or something. Not much I can do about that. Man, look in there. This thing has just been full of water. I'll do a little more vacuuming in here, I guess. So there you can see the casting number, C7AEA. So we got 1967 heads. We got 1967 intake manifold. I pretty much can say it's probably safe to say that this is a 1967 Z-Code 390. What an absolute waste of a really nice engine. Good grief. Anyway, we're going to see if we can get one of these heads off, and then we'll know 100%. Can you believe that? We've got 2 cylinders completely full of water. 2 that are just destroyed. Man, I've never seen anything like this. And look at this. This is not a factory head gasket. So the heads have been off of this thing. I wouldn't doubt if it's 30 over. Oh, man. So sad. Well, I got it up on end. Let's see what's in here. Oh, I missed a bolt. Oopsie. There we go. Oh, boy. Well, we'll see what we can get out of here. It's got the baffled pan. I don't know if all the hypos had that, or if they all had that, but we might be able to try and clean that oil pan up. That might be a reusable thing. Oh dear, look at the guck in there. Jeez. So now we're at the point where we could try and figure out what this thing is. Now you see here, these are 4-barrel pistons. You can tell by a shallow dish and the 4 valve reliefs. It's hard to get kind of an idea what they look like. But I could show you in comparison a 2-barrel piston. Here's a 2-barrel piston. You can see it's got a much deeper dish, which doesn't really require the extra valve reliefs. Although there is, you know, a little bit of a valve relief over here. But mostly it's this big dish. That's a 2-barrel, at least a 2-barrel car piston. Another thing we can do is measure the bore. We've got 4 inches and 50 thousandths. Okay, so let's go to our FE bore chart and see what that means. So here's our choices with a 4 and 50 thou bore: a 360, a 390, a 391, or a 410. They call it 4.054. That's a typo. Or a 410. So, how do we determine it from there? Well, we got to check the stroke or find the numbers on the crankshaft. We can find another clue by knocking out a piston and seeing what's cast into the side of it. As Ford like to cast the cubic inch displacement, like the intended destination of that piston, in the side of it. Now that doesn't always tell you the whole story, but it gets you a little closer. These things don't come out nicely. They're seized in there big time. But look what it says on it. It's got 410 cast into it. Now that doesn't necessarily mean this engine is a 410, because what they did, the 410, because it's basically, the 410 is a 390 block with a 428 crankshaft. And it used the 390 connecting rods. So what they did, they came up with a special piston that had the compression height was lower, or the wrist pin was higher in the piston than it would be on a 390. that allowed them to use the same 390 connecting rod without pushing the piston right at the top of the engine. But what they did, Ford did in 390 truck engines, because of this raised wrist pin height, they could put this in the 390 with the short 390 stroke in the truck engine, and it would sit the piston down in the bore at top dead center, which in effect would reduce compression, which is what they wanted in a truck engine. So that 410 does not necessarily mean this thing is a 410. Without seeing the numbers on the crankshaft or measuring the stroke, we can't be 100% sure. But there's something else we can check. The 410 was made by putting a 390 block together with a 428 crankshaft. The 428 and the 410 are, to my knowledge, the only FE engines that are externally balanced. So what we can do is look for a bob weight on the flex plate, a 28-ounce bob weight. And there you have it. What do you know? There's a 28-ounce bob weight on the backside of our flex plate. So all evidence right now is pointing toward this being a Mercury 410 engine. But we still can't be 100% sure until we see the number on the crankshaft or get one piston in this thing that moves so we can measure the stroke. Because a lot of mixing and matching goes on over the years. People may not be familiar. This transmission could have come out of a Mercury with a 410 in it and gotten stuck on the back of an old 390 truck engine. You just don't know. Yes, it would have shook, but people did stuff like that back in the day because they didn't understand. If the parts looked like they'd bolt together, they'd bolt them together, right? So we have to keep working on this and see if we can get down to that crankshaft. All right, well, we got all 8 of them out. Man, what an ugly mess. What an ugly mess. Now, to get these out, I had to destroy the block. But the block was destroyed anyway because from beating and banging on the first piston I tried to get out, I poked a hole through the cylinder in number 1. What are you going to do? I don't think this block could have been saved anyway. It was bad. Anyway, I got lots of 390 blocks around here. So what we had to do finally, because these blocks have got the deep skirt, I just took it outside and with a sledgehammer knocked the skirt off of it so I could get in and get at the rod nuts, eh? And once I did that, I selectively took out a few pistons until I was able to get the main caps off and just wriggle the crankshaft out. Then I could take out the last 3 or 4 pistons. Now, let's see what we got out of the bottom of this thing. Here's the crankshaft. And what we're looking for, it's really hard to see, but right there, there's a B stamped in the counterweight, like B as in Bob. And that is the B tells us that this is indeed a 428 or 410 crankshaft. Now, what we got to do is determine what size it is. So first we'll check the mains, or the mains. I'm a little confused. It's been a long day. First we'll check the mains, then we'll check a throw. So on the mains, we're looking for 2.748. That would be a standard size, and that's what we've got. You can see there, 2.748. Now let's check the throws. So we're looking for 2.438 on the throws, and we got 2.440, but this thing could be off a couple of thou, so we'll call that 2.438. So not only did we get the crank out of this thing, it's standard virgin. This thing, we know because we measured the bores, they were standard bores. So this engine has never been touched, it's never been messed with, and that's awesome. We got us a 428 crank, so we can build a 410. What 3 things did we learn from this entire exercise? Number 1, if you spend a whole bunch of time and money putting your car together, keep the hood closed. Number 2, keep an air cleaner on it. Number 3, don't park it in the grass. And I guess that'll do it for this one. I'll get that thing. I got to strip a couple more bits off it, but then that's it. It's out of here. That thing is finished, man. Anyway, I'd like to thank you as always for tuning into the Claremont Classic Garage. and coming on this 58 Meteor adventure with us. I hope you will come back and see us again next time. And until then, I'm Kevin, saying so long for now.